I still remember that afternoon vividly. I had just driven nearly 4 hours to reach the small forest plot I bought last year. Nothing fancy, just a piece of land in the Oregon woods with pine trees, a little creek, and most importantly, no noisy neighbors. I came to pitch a tent, light a fire, read a book, the perfect camping therapy that city folks like me crave. And then Karen showed up. I had just opened the car trunk to get my folding chair when I saw a woman, probably in her early 50s, with neatly tied blonde hair, wearing an outdoor blazer, walking toward me with a piece of paper and a clipboard in hand. Her voice was as hard as steel. "You're not allowed to be here. This is a restricted management area. I'm calling the police." I hadn't even said a word when she actually called, right in front of me, while glaring at me like I was some kind of trespasser. I stood there dumbfounded, not understanding what was going on. I hadn't entered anyone's home, hadn't set up camp illegally. This was my land. I was the legal owner. I even had the printed certificate and boundary map to prove it. And yet, I was being threatened with removal from my own property? Karen turned back to me, eyes squinting, lips curled. "The police will be here soon. You'd better start packing." I didn't know whether to be angry, to laugh, or to start recording a video as evidence. But one thing I did know, this story was far from over. My name is Travis. I'm 38 years old, and I'm a remote software engineer. I'm not the confrontational type. On the contrary, I live a pretty quiet life, value my privacy, and all I want on weekends is to escape the city, disconnect from emails and reports, and immerse myself in nature. Around mid last year, I spent most of my savings to buy a piece of land, over 3 acres, in Oregon's national forest. Not to build a house, not to develop anything, just to pitch a tent, go fishing, light a campfire, and slow down for a few days each month. I chose that place exactly because it was remote, peaceful, and secluded. No interruptions, no honking cars, no streetlights, no noise. But I was slightly wrong. There was someone living nearby, someone I'll never forget. Karen. She lived in a fairly large wooden cabin, about 200 meters from my land. Not exactly close, but somehow she always appeared whenever I showed up. I don't know how, but every time I set up camp, within 20 minutes, Karen would arrive. She never greeted me, never introduced herself. She had only one communication style, issuing commands. "You're not allowed to light a fire here. This area falls under the supervision of the Evergreen community. I'll be reporting you to the neighborhood council." She always carried a clipboard. You know the kind? Hard plastic, paper clipped on top, covered in notes. Always wore a name badge and a blazer, like she was running a company in the forest. At first I thought, okay, maybe she's just a bit particular. But as time went on, I began to realize something. Karen didn't just want to control me. She wanted to control the entire forest. She called herself the president of the Evergreen Forest Neighborhood Association, a community that, as far as I could tell, consisted of exactly one person. At first, I managed to stay calm. I thought maybe she was just old-fashioned, had lived here a long time, and saw every newcomer as an intruder. I even gave a small smile and said, "I'll keep it quiet, don't worry." Karen responded with a cold nod, like I was an employee being reprimanded in her company. But the discomfort didn't stop there. The next time I returned to the land, Karen had upgraded her tactics. Pinned to a tree near the entrance was a red ink flyer in all caps. "Warning, this area is not for outsiders. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Beneath that was a fake-looking stamp labeled Evergreen Regional Coordination Board. The funny part? I searched online. No such organization exists legally. I took the flyer down and kept it as evidence. How did I feel? Not exactly angry, more a mix of mild amusement and unease. Clearly, Karen wasn't playing games. A few days later, I found a brown envelope placed on my car hood. No name, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in large bold letters, "We know who you are. We're watching. Leave while you still can." I burst out laughing. We? Who exactly? Apparently, the Evergreen community still had just one member, Karen and her sacred clipboard. Even so, I kept trying to avoid confrontation. I still believed that if I didn't provoke her, she'd eventually get tired and give up. I was wrong. One April morning, I drove to my beloved piece of land. I was about to step out of the car when I froze. Right across the dirt road at the entrance was a bright orange mesh fence, the kind used at construction sites. Hanging on it was a large hand-painted sign in white letters. Restricted area. Private property. Trespassing is a criminal offense. I pulled out my phone, opened the GPS map, zoomed in, and just stood there for 3 seconds. She had just built an illegal fence, right on my land. I stepped out of the car, walked around to the back of the cabin where I kept my documents. I pulled out my land survey map, an officially notarized copy. I traced the boundaries carefully and confirmed it. Karen had crossed the line. That was the moment I stopped laughing. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a joke anymore. Karen had committed trespassing. This wasn't just about attitude now. It was a legally punishable act. I wasn't hesitant anymore. You want to play by the rules? I thought. Then I'll show you what the real rules look like. I went home that night, my head still spinning from the image of that orange fence planted squarely in the middle of my land, like a slap in the face. I wasn't just angry anymore. I felt insulted. Not because Karen yelled at me, but because she genuinely believed I would do nothing, that I would back off, avoid conflict, and quietly walk away. No, Karen, that's not who I am. I started planning. I contacted an old friend who's a real estate attorney. He guided me through the process of retrieving all the original survey records, official boundary maps from the county office. I even hired a GPS survey technician to come out to the land, marking each boundary point with professional-grade equipment. Every step I took, I documented. Photos, videos, records, every paper, every coordinate. I wasn't just preparing to strike back. I was preparing to hit Karen exactly where it would hurt the most: the law. A week later, I returned to the land. The fence was still there. The no trespassing sign now had red ribbons wrapped around it, like Karen was trying to stage a Hollywood crime scene. I smiled. Then I drove straight to the local police station. I brought copies of my land ownership certificate, notarized maps, and photos of the fence Karen had illegally erected on land I fully owned. I laid everything out: the threats, the anonymous flyers, the warning letter, and finally, the trespassing itself. The officer reviewing my case frowned as he examined the map. He asked, "She lives nearby?" I nodded. He sighed, then said the one thing I'd been waiting to hear: "This land is yours. Clearly, we'll take care of it." 2 days later, I got the call. We visited the property. She protested, but once we showed her the map and GPS data, we ordered her to take down the fence immediately. I asked, how did she react? The officer didn't hesitate. Shocked. Very shocked, but she had no argument. I drove back out to the land. No fence, no signs, just a few marks in the dirt, like remnants of a silent battle that had finally ended. I stood there in the forest. The wind whispered softly through the tall pines. Sunlight glittered across the old canvas of my tent. For the first time in weeks, I truly felt like I belonged. I thought that once the fence was taken down, it would all be over. But no. To Karen, defeat was merely an invitation to act even more dangerous. One Saturday afternoon, as I was rebuilding my campfire and enjoying the sense of actual ownership over my land, a familiar voice called out from a distance, "We're having a community meeting this afternoon. You should attend." I turned around. It was Karen, this time in a white button-down shirt, khaki pants, and of course, that ever-present clipboard in hand. I gave a half smile. Community? The Evergreen Neighborhood Council. We'll be discussing safety issues and land ownership. I said nothing, but in my head, a plan was already forming. That meeting? I showed up, but I didn't come empty-handed. Karen had set it up in a clearing near her cabin. About 5 people were there, mostly older residents scattered around the area. I had never seen them before. Karen opened the meeting with her usual authoritative tone. "Thank you all for coming. Today, we need to talk about an individual who's disrupting the peace in this forest. This person has lit unauthorized fires, camped without permission, and trespassed on my property." I didn't interrupt. I just sat silently and placed a folder onto the wooden table in the center of the circle. Karen continued, "We need to take stronger measures, maybe petition to have him removed or reinstall the perimeter fence." That's when I stood up. "Excuse me, may I say a few words?" All eyes turned to me. Calmly, without anger or sarcasm, I opened the folder and pulled out 3 documents. 1. A land ownership certificate, stamped and verified by the county. 2. An official survey map, complete with boundary lines and GPS coordinates. 3. a formal warning letter from the police directing Karen to cease her unlawful obstruction. I spoke clearly, steadily, not to provoke, just to state the truth. The land Karen refers to as hers is in fact mine. These are the legal documents proving that. I've reported everything to the authorities. It was the police who ordered her to take down the fence. The air in the meeting shifted. An older man sitting near Karen furrowed his brow and asked, "Wait, so that land really is yours?" I nodded, handing him a copy of the documents. A middle-aged woman chimed in, "And what about this council? Is it even real?" I looked at Karen. Her hands clenched the clipboard tightly. Her face flushed red, but she said nothing. The silence said it all. One by one, the neighbors began to leave. No one spoke to Karen. No one stayed behind to hear her new rules. No one offered support. She stood alone, still gripping the clipboard, but this time it held no power. Karen was no longer the forest manager. She was just a neighbor with an inflated ego, and a bitter loss she couldn't deny. I never saw Karen again after that meeting. No more clipboard, no more flyers, no more orange fences or no trespassing signs nailed to my pine trees. Just silence. The other forest residents, those who had once followed her out of politeness or to avoid trouble, now began to smile at me whenever we crossed paths. They greeted me warmly, asked about the weather, and some even stopped by with gifts. A jar of wild honey here, a friendly wave there, as if to say sorry for staying silent. And Karen? Word was she stepped down from the Evergreen Neighborhood Council, a council that, frankly, had only ever existed in her imagination. A month later, her cabin had a sign out front, "Urgent sale, no broker." I didn't ask. I didn't need to. But deep down, I understood. When you live to control everything around you, eventually isolation is the only thing left by your side. As for me, I returned to my life. Every weekend, I drove up to the forest, set up camp, read books, brew coffee over boiling spring water, watched the fire crackle as the sun dipped behind the trees. No one bothered me anymore. No more clipboards. No more made-up forest laws. Just me, and the forest I had bought, protected, and reclaimed using the one thing Karen could never overpower: the law. And if there's one lesson I took from it all, it's this. The people who yell the loudest are usually the ones who never read the fine print. If you've ever encountered a Karen in your life, someone who loves giving orders, thinks they control everything, and believes the world should follow their rules, you're not alone. There are Karens everywhere, on your street, in parking lots, and sometimes even deep in the forest, where you thought only birds and wind existed. If someone's ever tried to enforce fake rules on you, drop a comment below. If you think this Karen got exactly what she deserved, legally, smash that like button. And if you want more stories like this, where justice defeats the clipboard, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. We've got plenty more Karen picked the wrong person stories coming your way. Because the most elegant way to shut down a Karen is with the law.